Have you ever watched your dog meet someone new and immediately felt like something was off? Not because the person did anything wrong. Not because your dog barked or growled. Just unusually cautious. Maybe they stayed behind you. Maybe they watched from a distance. Maybe they accepted a pet. But never fully relaxed. And for some reason, you couldn't stop thinking about it afterward. Most people explain moments like these with one simple phrase. Dogs can sense bad people. It's one of the most common beliefs dog owners hold. And honestly, you've probably heard the stories. A dog dislikes someone. And years later, that person turns out to be dishonest. A dog refuses to walk into a room. And later, something dangerous is discovered there. One stranger gets instant trust. Another gets the cold shoulder. No explanation. No obvious reason. The conclusion seems obvious. Dogs must have some kind of hidden sixth sense. But what if that's not actually what's happening? What if your dog isn't detecting evil? What if they aren't reading energy? What if they're not picking up on something supernatural at all? What if they're doing something far more impressive than that? Decades of research into canine behavior suggest that dogs aren't judging people based on magic. They're judging them based on information. A lot of information. Most of which humans never even notice. And once you understand how dogs gather that information, and how they process it, you start seeing their behavior in a completely different light. Let's start with the first few seconds. Because they matter. Far more than most people realize. Think about the last time your dog met a stranger. How long did it take before they formed an opinion? 5 minutes? 1 minute? 30 seconds? For most dogs, it starts almost instantly. Before you've even finished the introduction. Before the stranger has said much of anything. Before any meaningful interaction has taken place. Your dog is already collecting data. The first thing they notice isn't the face. Humans naturally focus on faces. Dogs don't. Dogs read the entire body. How someone walks. How fast they approach. Whether their movements are smooth or tense. Whether they move directly toward the dog or approach from a relaxed angle. To us, those details seem trivial. To a dog, they can reveal a lot. And that makes sense when you consider how long dogs have lived alongside humans. For thousands of years. Reading body language wasn't just useful. It was essential. Sometimes, it was the difference between safety and danger. So dogs became remarkably sensitive to movement. A nervous person moves differently than a relaxed one. An angry person moves differently than a calm one. A confident person moves differently than someone who's afraid. And your dog will often notice those differences. Long before you do. But movement is only part of the story. Because there's an entire world your dog is detecting. That you can't even smell. Imagine walking into a room. And instantly knowing who's nervous. Who's excited. Who's stressed. Who's confident. Who's afraid. For humans, that sounds impossible. For a dog, it's just another ordinary day. A dog's nose is genuinely extraordinary. Scientists estimate that dogs possess hundreds of millions more scent receptors than humans. And when people experience stress or fear, subtle chemical changes happen inside the body. Those changes can alter the scent molecules released through sweat. And even through breath. Dogs often pick up on exactly that. Now, that doesn't mean dogs know what someone is thinking. And it definitely doesn't mean they can sniff out a criminal. That's not how it works. What it does mean is that they're constantly gathering clues. Tiny clues. About a person's emotional state. And those clues become part of a much larger picture. A picture that's always being updated. Always being refined. Always being compared against past experiences. And here's something many people completely overlook. Your dog isn't just studying strangers. They're studying you. Every single day. They learn your routines. Your habits. Your moods. Your reactions. They know what your relaxed voice sounds like. And what your stressed voice sounds like. They know when you're comfortable. And when you're not. So when someone new enters the picture, your dog pays very close attention to your response. Do your shoulders tighten? Does your voice change? Do you hesitate? Do you seem uncomfortable? Some researchers believe dogs use their owners as a kind of emotional reference point. A benchmark. A guide. If something about your behavior feels different, your dog notices. And they take that information seriously. Not because they're psychic. Not because they're reading minds. But because they're paying attention to the person they know best. And that brings us to a fascinating question. Do dogs automatically trust people? Or do they actually evaluate whether someone is trustworthy first? A few years ago, researchers designed an experiment to find out. And the results surprised a lot of people. The experiment itself was surprisingly simple. A dog sat in a room, with several containers placed nearby. A researcher pointed toward one container. The dog followed the gesture, and found food. Success. The information was accurate. Trust established. A moment later, the researcher pointed again. The dog followed without hesitation. Why wouldn't it? The first signal had been correct. But this time, the container was empty. No food. No reward. The information had been wrong. Then came the real test. The researcher pointed a third time. And this time, there actually was food waiting in the container. But something interesting happened. Many dogs hesitated. Some slowed down. Others ignored the gesture entirely. Something had changed. The dogs weren't confused. And they hadn't suddenly lost interest in food. They had lost confidence in the source of the information. After only a couple of interactions, they were already reevaluating who to trust. Think about that for a second. These dogs weren't blindly following a pointing finger. They weren't acting on instinct alone. They were quietly asking a question. Can I actually trust this person? And that's remarkable. Because it suggests dogs aren't simply responding to commands. They're evaluating reliability. They're paying attention to patterns. And they're updating those patterns when new information appears. Which raises another question. Why does predictability matter so much to dogs? The answer may be simpler than you think. For dogs. So they designed another series of experiments. In these studies, a dog's owner would interact with a stranger. Sometimes the owner needed help. And sometimes they asked for assistance with a simple task. In one version, the stranger helped. In another, the stranger refused. The dog simply watched. Nothing happened directly to the dog. No rewards. No punishments. No personal interaction. Just observation. Afterward, both individuals offered treats to the dog. And logically, you might expect the dog to accept food from either person. After all, a treat is a treat. But that wasn't always what happened. Many dogs showed noticeably less interest in engaging with the person who had refused to help their owner. Some avoided them. Some hesitated. Some chose to interact more willingly with the helpful person instead. And that's important. Because it suggests dogs aren't only tracking experiences that happen directly to them. They're also paying attention to social interactions happening around them. Especially when someone they care about is involved. Think about what that means. Your dog may be observing relationships, watching behavior, comparing actions, and forming impressions based on what they see. That's more sophisticated than many people realize. It's not just obedience. It's not just conditioning. It's social evaluation. And while scientists continue debating exactly how complex this process is, the evidence suggests dogs are paying attention to far more than we once believed. There's another fascinating question worth exploring. Can dogs tell the difference between someone being wrong and someone being deceptive? Imagine two people give you bad directions. One person is simply mistaken. The other intentionally misleads you. Humans naturally understand that difference. But can dogs? Researchers have explored this idea. And while the results aren't completely settled, some studies suggest that many dogs respond differently depending on context. When someone appears genuinely mistaken, dogs often remain willing to trust them again. But when behavior repeatedly appears misleading, trust begins to weaken. Again, nobody is claiming dogs understand lying the same way humans do. That would be a huge leap. But the evidence suggests many dogs aren't focused only on outcomes. They're paying attention to patterns, to consistency, to reliability. And that's a surprisingly advanced skill, because it requires remembering previous experiences, comparing them against new information, and adjusting behavior accordingly. In other words, dogs aren't simply reacting. They're learning, they're evaluating, and they're adapting, which may be one reason they've become such extraordinary companions to humans. For thousands of years, they've been studying us, watching us, learning from us, and quietly figuring out who and what they can trust. Now, it's important to be honest about what the research actually shows, because science rarely gives us simple answers, and not every study reaches the same conclusion. In fact, some newer experiments have found something surprising. Dogs didn't always seem interested in judging strangers who were kind or unkind to other strangers. In other words, dogs may not be running a constant background check on every person they meet. And that's important, because it challenges one of the most popular beliefs dog owners have: the idea that dogs are always silently judging everyone around them. The reality appears to be more complicated. Context matters a lot. Your dog probably cares far more about situations that affect them directly, or involve someone they care about. A stranger being rude to another stranger across the park? That may not mean much to your dog. But a stranger treating their owner poorly? That's a completely different story. And that distinction matters, because it helps explain why dogs sometimes react strongly in certain situations, and show no reaction at all in others. Now, some dog owners hear all of this, and immediately start worrying. My dog loves everyone. My dog greets every stranger we pass. My dog has never disliked a single person. Does that mean my dog is bad at reading people? Not at all. In fact, that's completely normal. Most dogs begin with a baseline of trust. Friendliness is normal. Curiosity is normal. Sociability is normal. A dog that likes people isn't naive. And it doesn't mean they're missing something. Many well-adjusted dogs simply assume good intentions, until experience gives them a reason not to. That's not a weakness. It's just their default setting. What matters more is when behavior changes. When a dog that's normally friendly becomes unusually cautious. That's worth paying attention to. Not blindly believing. Not assuming the person is dangerous. Just noticing. Because sudden behavioral changes often mean your dog has detected something different. A scent. A movement. A tone of voice. A pattern. Something that stands out from what they're used to. And that's information worth considering. So, can dogs really sense bad people? Probably not in the way most people imagine. There's no scientific evidence that dogs have supernatural powers. They're not detecting evil. They're not reading souls. They're not seeing hidden auras. But what they can do may actually be more impressive. Dogs are extraordinary observers. They notice details most humans miss. They remember patterns. They compare experiences. They detect inconsistencies. They read body language. They monitor emotional signals. And they gather information constantly. Every second they're around us. For thousands of years, living alongside humans has shaped dogs into experts at understanding our behavior, our movements, our habits, our emotions, our routines. And somewhere along the way, they became remarkably skilled at turning all of those observations into decisions. Not magical decisions. Not mystical decisions. Just incredibly sophisticated ones. Which means the next time your dog pauses before approaching someone, don't assume they've uncovered a dark secret. But don't ignore the behavior either. Your dog is probably doing what dogs have always done: watching, observing, comparing, collecting information, patiently deciding how they feel about a situation. And honestly, that's a skill many humans could learn from. Because in a world where people often rush to conclusions, dogs tend to do something different. They pay attention first, and judge later. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your experience. Has your dog ever instantly loved someone they had just met? Or unexpectedly avoided a person for no obvious reason? What happened? And did your dog's reaction turn out to be right? Share your story in the comments below. Some of the most fascinating insights about dog behavior don't come from laboratories. They come from real people, living with dogs, every single day. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more science-backed insights into the incredible minds of dogs. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.